You wake up each morning and do the work. You show up for therapy, you journal, you sit with the discomfort, you choose differently than you used to. You resist the old patterns, you speak your truth even when your voice shakes. You set boundaries that make you feel guilty. You walk away from what no longer serves you. And nobody sees it. Nobody applauds. Nobody sends a text saying they noticed how far you've come or how hard you're trying. Your family doesn't acknowledge the ways you've changed. Your friends don't comment on your growth. The world moves on as if none of it is happening, as if you're not in the middle of the most difficult transformation of your life. And somewhere in the quiet of your own mind, a question begins to form, one you're almost ashamed to ask. If no one sees this, if no one cares, does it even matter? Is there dignity in moving forward when you're moving forward completely alone, when the work you're doing is invisible, when the person you're becoming is witnessed by no one but yourself? This is the specific suffering I want to address today, because it's one of the most corrosive forms of discouragement that exists. It's not the difficulty of the work itself that breaks people. It's the silence around it. It's doing everything right and having absolutely no one notice. It's the birthday that goes unremarked, the anniversary of sobriety that passes without acknowledgement, the day you finally left the toxic relationship and nobody called to say they were proud of you. It's the accumulation of unseen effort, the private victories that remain private, the transformation happening in a vacuum of recognition. And what makes this particularly painful is that we live in a world that has taught us relentlessly and from birth that things only become real when they are witnessed, that achievement only counts when it's acknowledged, that change only matters when someone else sees it and confirms that yes, you're different now, yes, you've grown. We've internalized the logic of social media so deeply that we've begun to believe our very existence requires an audience. And when we're doing the hardest work of our lives and that audience is absent, when we're fundamentally restructuring who we are and nobody's watching, we begin to feel not just unappreciated, but somehow unreal, as if we're disappearing even as we're becoming. You've probably tried to solve this in various ways. Maybe you've shared more, posted about your journey, tried to make your progress visible. Maybe you've explicitly asked for recognition, told people you need their support, their acknowledgement. Maybe you've withdrawn entirely, decided that if no one cares, you'll just stop caring too. Stop trying. Stop reaching for anything beyond what's immediately required of you. Maybe you've sought out communities online, groups of people supposedly doing the same work, hoping to find witnesses there. And perhaps you found temporary relief in these approaches, brief moments where someone liked your post or commented, or said they understood. But then the silence returns. The lack of acknowledgement persists. And you're back where you started, moving forward into a future that feels increasingly hollow because you're moving into it alone, because the person you're becoming has no one to reflect her back to you, no one to confirm that she exists. But what if the entire framing of this problem is wrong? What if the question itself, does my progress matter if no one sees it, is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what progress is, what dignity is, what it means to act in the world? Hannah Arendt spent much of her philosophical career examining the nature of human action, the conditions under which people act with dignity and meaning, and the relationship between the public and private realms of existence. And one of her most profound insights, one that directly addresses this suffering you're experiencing, is that we have confused two entirely different kinds of human activity. We have conflated action that requires witnesses with action that generates its own significance. We have mistaken the need for external validation, which is real and human and understandable, with the actual source of dignity, which comes from somewhere else entirely. The pain you're feeling right now, the sense that your progress doesn't matter because no one acknowledges it, this comes from operating under the assumption that significance is conferred from outside, that your worth as a person is determined by whether others notice, care, or comment. But Arendt would ask you to consider something radical. What if dignity is not something given to you by others, but something that emerges from the act itself? What if the very fact that you're moving forward, that you're choosing differently, that you're doing the work, what if this generates its own worth independent of any audience? Let me be very clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not suggesting that wanting recognition is shallow or that needing support is weakness. The desire to be seen is fundamental to being human. Arendt herself wrote extensively about the importance of the public realm, the space where human beings appear to one another, where we confirm each other's existence through mutual recognition. This is real. This matters. When you've worked hard and no one notices, when you've transformed yourself and no one acknowledges it, the pain is legitimate. You're not wrong for wanting your progress to be visible. You're not weak for needing someone to say they see what you're doing. The longing for witnesses is not the problem. The problem is believing that without them, your actions lose their meaning. The problem is making the significance of what you're doing dependent on whether anyone else cares. Consider what actually happens when you do the work of transformation without an audience. Every morning you wake up and choose recovery over relapse, sobriety over escape, honesty over performance, authenticity over approval. No one sees these choices. No one tracks them. There's no scoreboard, no public record, no comments section where people affirm your progress. It's just you alone with yourself, making decision after decision that runs counter to your conditioning, that resists the pull of old patterns, that moves you incrementally toward a version of yourself you can barely imagine yet. And here's what's extraordinary about this. The fact that no one is watching doesn't change what's happening. The transformation is still occurring. The neural pathways are still being rewired. The person you were is still being left behind. The person you're becoming is still emerging. The work is still working. Its effectiveness, its reality, its profound significance in the actual substance of your life, all of this exists completely independent of whether anyone notices or cares. This is what Arendt meant when she distinguished between different kinds of human activity. There is action that exists in the public realm, that requires witnesses, that derives its meaning from being seen and acknowledged by others. This is political action, social action, the kind of engagement that fundamentally depends on plurality, on appearing before others. And then there is the work of becoming, the labor of transformation, the private realm of existence where you are alone with yourself, where you do the difficult internal work of changing your relationship to reality. This second kind of activity doesn't require an audience because it's not performing for one. It's not trying to appear a certain way or gain approval or achieve recognition. It's the work itself, the actual substance of transformation, and it has its own intrinsic dignity. If this perspective is opening something up for you, consider subscribing. I explore these territories every week and I'd love to have you along for the journey. Think about the difference between these two modes. When you're acting in the public realm, seeking recognition, trying to make your progress visible, you're necessarily performing. You're translating your internal experience into something legible to others. You're shaping your narrative to be understood, appreciated, acknowledged. There's nothing wrong with this, it's part of being social beings, but it's a translation, it's a performance. And the more you depend on this performance being seen and validated, the more you lose touch with the actual work underneath it. You start doing things because they'll be noticed rather than because they're necessary. You start measuring your progress by external markers rather than internal shifts. You start believing that the translated version, the performed version, is more real than the lived experience. And this is where the suffering intensifies, because you've handed the determination of your worth over to others, made it dependent on their attention, their approval, their care. But when you're doing the work in the private realm, when you're moving forward without an audience, something different is happening. You're not performing, you're not translating. You're directly encountering yourself, your patterns, your resistances, your possibilities. There's no buffer, no mediation, no one to confirm that what you're experiencing is real or valid or worthwhile. It's just you and the work. And this is actually where genuine transformation happens. Not in the performed version others see, but in the unwitnessed moments where you make choices that no one will ever know about, where you resist impulses no one will ever applaud you for resisting, where you sit with discomfort that no one will ever acknowledge you sat with. These are the moments that change you. These are the acts that have dignity, not because they're seen, but because they're done. I know many of you watching this have been doing this work in silence for a long time. You've been healing, growing, changing, and the people in your life either haven't noticed or haven't cared enough to say anything. You've felt invisible in your own transformation, and it's made you question whether any of it matters, whether you should even keep trying if the result is just more of this lonely forward movement into a future where you're still unacknowledged, still unseen. So let me ask you directly, what has this silence cost you? How has the lack of recognition affected your commitment to yourself? Has it made you want to give up, go back, stop trying? I want you to share in the comments, not because I need engagement, but because someone else watching this needs to see your words. They need to know they're not the only one doing hard things in the dark. And if you can't find the words right now, if it feels too heavy to articulate, just type this: I'm still here, that's it. Just those 3 words. Because when you do, you create permission for dozens of others to say it too. Your willingness to name this experience, to acknowledge that you're still moving forward even when no one's watching, it helps break the silence that makes all of us feel alone. So comment below. Tell me where you are in this. I read every single one, and I promise you're not alone in what you're feeling. Now let's go deeper into what Arendt understood about human dignity, because this gets to the heart of why you can move forward with meaning even when no one cares. She wrote extensively about what she called natality, the human capacity for beginning something new. Every action, every choice, every moment where you decide to be different than you were, this is an exercise of natality. You're bringing something new into existence, and here's what's crucial. The newness doesn't require validation from others to be real. When you choose differently this morning than you chose yesterday, when you respond to a trigger with awareness instead of reaction, when you set a boundary you've never set before, you are creating something genuinely new in the world. A new pattern, a new possibility, a new version of who you can be. The fact that this happens privately, that no one witnesses it, doesn't make it any less real or significant. If anything, it makes it more real because it's happening at the level of actual being rather than appearance. This is where we have to examine a painful truth. Much of what we call the desire for recognition is actually a desire to avoid the full weight of our own freedom. When others acknowledge our progress, when they see and affirm what we're doing, they relieve us of having to fully own it ourselves. Their recognition becomes a kind of external scaffolding we can lean on. Their validation tells us we're doing the right thing, moving in the right direction, becoming someone worthwhile. But when that scaffolding is absent, when no one is confirming our choices, we're left alone with our freedom. We have to decide for ourselves whether what we're doing matters. We have to generate our own sense of meaning. We have to be both the actor and the witness. And this is terrifying because it means we can't outsource the determination of our worth. We can't rely on others to tell us we're okay. We have to know it ourselves. We have to find the dignity in the act itself rather than in how the act is received. Arendt talked about the space of appearance, the realm where human beings show themselves to one another, where we exist as visible, public beings. This space is important. It's where we form relationships, build communities, participate in collective life. But she also recognized that much of human existence happens outside this space, in the private realm where we are alone with ourselves, where we do the work that may never be seen or acknowledged. And she insisted that this private realm has its own form of dignity, its own kind of significance. When you do the work of transformation without witnesses, you're not somehow failing to exist fully. You're exercising a different kind of human capacity, one that's equally important. The capacity to act from internal conviction rather than external validation, to generate your own sense of worth rather than depending on others to confer it. Think about the people you most admire, the ones whose lives seem to have real substance and integrity. Chances are what you admire about them isn't primarily their public achievements or the recognition they've received. It's something else. It's the sense that they're acting from deep internal alignment, that they're doing what they do because it's right for them to do it, not because anyone's watching or approving. It's the quality of being self-generated, self-directed, self-validating. They don't seem to need constant affirmation because they've found the source of affirmation within themselves. They've learned to be their own witness. And this isn't arrogance or self-sufficiency or a denial of needing others. It's something more fundamental. It's the recognition that dignity comes from the act of moving forward itself, not from whether anyone notices you're doing it. This is what you're learning right now, even though it doesn't feel like learning. It feels like suffering. It feels like abandonment. It feels like proof that you don't matter. But what's actually happening is you're being forced to find a deeper source of validation, one that doesn't depend on external acknowledgement. You're learning that you can move forward even when no one cares. You can transform even when no one witnesses it. You can become someone new even when the people around you still see you as who you were. And this is not a consolation prize. This is not what you settle for when you can't get real recognition. This is actually more real than recognition. This is the foundation that makes all future recognition meaningful rather than addictive. Because here's what happens when you base your sense of progress on external validation. You become dependent on it. You need increasingly more acknowledgement to feel okay about what you're doing. Every action becomes a bid for attention. Every change becomes a performance for an audience. You lose touch with your own internal sense of direction. You stop knowing what you actually want or need because you're so focused on what will get noticed, what will be praised, what will make others see you the way you want to be seen. You become a person who only exists in the eyes of others, and this is a profound form of unfreedom, even though it might feel like connection. You've handed your agency over to everyone else, made yourself completely dependent on their responses, their moods, their attention spans, their capacity to notice or care. But when you learn to move forward without that validation, when you keep doing the work even though no one's watching, even though no one cares, you discover something extraordinary. You become free. Not free from needing people, not free from wanting connection or recognition or support, but free from making these things the condition for your own forward movement. Free to act from conviction rather than performance. Free to change because change is what's needed, not because change will be applauded. Free to be who you're becoming rather than who others expect or want or remember you being. This is the dignity Arendt was pointing toward. The dignity of self-generated action. The dignity of moving forward as an end in itself rather than as a means to getting noticed. Let me give you a concrete example of what this looks like in practice. Imagine two people, both doing the difficult work of recovery from addiction. One person posts regularly about their journey, documents every milestone, shares every struggle and victory with their online community. They get support, encouragement, validation. The likes and comments fuel their motivation. When they hit a difficult day, they know they can share it and receive affirmation. The other person does the work in complete privacy. They go to meetings no one knows about. They journal in notebooks no one will read. They make daily choices no one witnesses. They have hard days and sit through them alone. They reach milestones and mark them privately. Now, which person's recovery is more real, more meaningful, more likely to last? Neither. Both are doing the work. Both are changing. But the second person is developing something the first person might not be: the capacity to do the work, regardless of acknowledgement. They're learning that their sobriety doesn't depend on anyone else seeing or validating it. They're building a relationship with themselves that doesn't require external confirmation, and this over time becomes an unshakable foundation. It becomes a kind of strength that can't be taken away because it was never dependent on being given in the first place. This is what you're building right now, even though you can't see it yet. Every day you show up and do the work without recognition, you're strengthening your capacity for self-generated dignity. You're learning that you can be your own witness. You're discovering that the transformation is real whether or not anyone else acknowledges it. You're developing an internal source of validation that will serve you for the rest of your life, because once you find it, once you truly understand that your worth doesn't depend on others seeing it, you become unshakable in a very particular way. Not immune to hurt, not beyond needing others, but no longer dependent on their acknowledgement for your fundamental sense of being okay. No longer making your forward movement conditional on their care or attention or approval. Arendt wrote about the courage required to act, to begin something new in the world. And she recognized that this courage is most tested not when our actions are seen and praised, but when they're invisible, when they occur in the private realm where no one is watching, where there's no applause, no recognition, no external reward. This is where we discover whether we're acting from genuine conviction or merely performing for approval. This is where we find out if we can generate our own sense of meaning, or if we're entirely dependent on others to provide it for us. And the people who can act courageously in this space, who can move forward when no one cares, these are the people who have found something that most never find, the internal source of dignity that doesn't require external confirmation. Now, I want to address something that might be coming up for you as you hear this. You might be thinking, this sounds like I'm supposed to not need people, like I'm supposed to be completely self-sufficient, like wanting recognition means I'm weak or dependent, or haven't reached some higher level of spiritual development. And this is absolutely not what I'm saying. The need for recognition is legitimate. The desire to be seen is fundamental to being human. We are social beings. We need each other. We need to be witnessed, acknowledged, supported. There is nothing wrong with wanting your progress to be visible, with hoping that the people in your life will notice you've changed, with wishing someone would tell you they're proud of you. All of that is real and valid and human. What I'm inviting you to examine is the belief that without that recognition, your progress doesn't matter. The belief that if no one cares, there's no point. The belief that dignity is something conferred by others rather than generated by the act itself. Because here's the truth. You can legitimately want recognition and also move forward without it. You can hope for acknowledgement and continue growing even when it doesn't come. You can need people and still do the work in the times when people aren't available or present or capable of seeing what you're doing. These aren't contradictions. They're the reality of human existence. We need others, and we need ourselves. We want to be seen, and we have to be able to act, even when we're not. The goal isn't to transcend the need for connection. The goal is to not make your forward movement hostage to whether that connection is currently available. The goal is to find the dignity in the act itself, so that when recognition comes, it's a gift rather than a lifeline, an affirmation rather than the sole source of your sense of worth. If what I'm sharing here resonates with something you've been feeling, something you haven't quite been able to name, then I want you to know you're not alone in this. There are many of us exploring these questions, sitting with these uncomfortable truths, learning to see in new ways. I create these videos for people who are ready to go deeper, who aren't satisfied with surface answers, who want to understand rather than just feel better temporarily. If that's you, consider subscribing. Not because you need another channel to follow, but because this journey of understanding yourself, of waking up to what's real, it helps to have companions along the way. People who won't offer you easy fixes, but will sit with you in the questions. I'll be here every week with another exploration, another perspective, another thread to pull on, and I'd be honored to have you here as part of this community of seekers and thinkers. So if this feels right, hit that subscribe button. And if you found value in this particular exploration, let me know in the comments what resonated most with you. Your reflections often illuminate things I hadn't considered. So where does this leave us? You're still doing the work. You're still moving forward. And most likely, most people in your life still don't notice or care. That hasn't changed, but perhaps what can change is how you hold this reality. Perhaps instead of experiencing the lack of recognition as evidence that your progress doesn't matter, you can begin to see it as the condition under which you discover a deeper source of meaning. Perhaps instead of feeling abandoned by the absence of witnesses, you can begin to recognize that you are the witness that matters most. Not because others don't matter, not because their acknowledgement wouldn't be valuable, but because your sense of your own worth, your own progress, your own transformation, this cannot ultimately depend on whether they see it. It has to come from you. It has to be self-generated. It has to be rooted in the act itself, rather than in the response to the act. This is what Arendt meant by the dignity of action. It's not that action in the public realm, action that's seen and acknowledged, is somehow less valuable. It's that there's a different kind of dignity in the private realm, in the choices we make when no one's watching, in the work we do that may never be witnessed. This dignity doesn't require an audience because it's not performing. It's not seeking validation. It's the work itself, the act itself, the forward movement itself. And when you find this, when you truly understand that you can move forward even when no one cares, you discover a kind of freedom that changes everything. Not freedom from needing people, but freedom from making your entire sense of worth dependent on their attention, their acknowledgement, their capacity to see and care. Every morning you wake up and do the work. You show up for therapy, you journal, You sit with the discomfort. You choose differently. And maybe nobody sees it. Maybe nobody applauds. Maybe your family still treats you like who you were 5 years ago. Maybe your friends never comment on how far you've come. Maybe the world moves on as if none of it is happening. But something is happening. You are changing. The person you were is being left behind. The person you're becoming is emerging. And this transformation, this actual substance of change occurring in the lived reality of your existence, this has its own dignity. This generates its own meaning. This matters independently of whether anyone notices or cares. The significance is in the doing, not in the seeing. The worth is in the act, not in the acknowledgement. The dignity is in moving forward, even when, especially when you're moving forward alone. This doesn't mean the loneliness doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean you stop wishing someone would notice. It doesn't mean you transcend the human need for connection and recognition. But it means you're no longer held hostage by the absence of these things. You're no longer making your forward movement conditional on whether others validate it. You're learning that you can be your own witness, that you can generate your own sense of worth, that you can find the dignity in the act itself. And this, ultimately, is what allows you to keep going. Not the false promise that recognition is coming, not the denial of how much you want to be seen, but the deep understanding that your transformation is real, whether or not anyone else acknowledges it, that your choices matter whether or not anyone applauds them, that you are becoming someone new, whether or not anyone notices the person you were is gone. The work is working, the change is happening, the dignity is there, you are moving forward, and you are doing so with courage that most will never understand, because you are doing so when no one cares. And that perhaps is where the deepest dignity lies,